Taylor Posey here of Irving Book Company, and this video is about age and value of books. Age and value of books. So when I used to work at an open bookstore, I'd often get calls and somebody would be on the other line and they'd say, "I've got some old books," and I'd have to say, just like I would say the day before and the day before that, very often, "Oh, you see, age has virtually nothing to do with value." And a customer here and there would often be brokenhearted to hear this. I thought, I found a book from 1920, some Mark Twain edition from 1921. It must be valuable. The trouble is, 1920s is not very old for a book. Not to mention 1950s. So first of all, it's not very old. Second of all, age has very little to do with the value of a book. Now, one great exception off the bat are the incunables. The incunables are books printed before, say, 1501. They're called incunable because incunabula are swaddling clothes. So these are baby books. These are books printed within 50 years after the invention of the printing press. So naturally there's some money in those. But otherwise, there's very little correlation between age and value. You'll find books in the 17th century that are maybe $30, $40 books, maybe $20 books. And conversely, there are books in the 20th century, late 20th century, thousands of dollars, something like first printing of Blood Meridian, a $3,000 book. Age didn't make it $3,000. There were other considerations. And one of those considerations I talked about in the book condition video. So condition is a big deal. Also scarcity is another consideration. And content, though, is the third of these considerations. Age is very bottom of the list. So let's get some examples. Here is an Irving Book Company book, a big old book. 1665 was the year in which this copy of Francis Bacon's Opera Omnia was printed. The Opera Omnia being the complete works, Francis Bacon. This is the first Latin edition, printed in 1665. And there's some money to it, say $500, $1,000 book maybe. And so let's say this book is $750 for the sake of argument. It's not a $750 book because it's an old book. It's a $750 book, say, because it's Francis Bacon, because it's a first Latin edition, which does have some significance. Francis Bacon wrote his essays in Latin and in English, but the Latin essays, rather than being a mere translation of the English, they were written independently. So you might read one of his essays in Latin and English, and come to find you just read two very different essays on the same subject. At any rate, so 1665, Francis Bacon. Here we've got 1945, André Cortège, Day of Paris. And this copy is maybe a $1,500 book. Not because it was printed in 1945, not because a 1945 book is an old book, but because it's still got its dust jacket. And this copy is signed by André Cortège on the title page. So many other factors that make a book valuable besides age, and age seldom does. And so don't be fooled. If you have old books, they may yet be valuable, but not because of age. And not necessarily because of age. There's always some caveat. And a bookseller is always happy to look at old books. But let me tell you that a book printed in 1923, 1916, whatever, not an old book. And let me say also that age has virtually nothing to do with value. If you were to bring me, say, a copy of, what's a good example? Let's take a copy of Plautus's comedies, published in Milan in 1500. I'd say that's an old book. You've got an old book, and there's probably some money in it. But otherwise, generally speaking, age has very little to do with value in a book.